So Steve Leisman rejoins us this afternoon. Also want to bring in three former top Fed heads. Former Federal Reserve Governor Robert Heller joins us. Former Federal Reserve Governor Mark Olson's here with me across from the Fed in Washington, D.C. And Bob McTeer is former Dallas Fed president, a fellow at the National Center for Policy Analysis, as well as a CNBC contributor. Gentlemen, good afternoon to all of you. Mark, I want to welcome you to the program.
Thank you, Carl.
We were talking briefly offset. Not a lot of surprises in the statement, but you did see a couple things that caught your eye.
A few, and Steve outlined a couple of them, but one I would particularly call your attention to was when they're talking about adjusting the portfolio. They're now saying that the Fed is prepared, as opposed to the previous language of will adjust. And so when they say is prepared, I think that is a very deliberate attempt to say that they're ready to make some adjustments.
In what sense? Not an extension?
Unlikely to be an extension, but I think that what we may hear is more this afternoon about the next step in the process. I think one of the things that Chairman Bernanke has emphasized all the way along is that the risk to QE2 was whether or not the exit might be misinterpreted, and so my sense is that might be what he is focusing on.
Bob, you want to jump on that? Anything else you might find interesting?
Well, I agree with that. All along, we can't have QE2 ending cold turkey with nothing to replace it, and at the very least, they've got to buy enough securities or something else for those maturing. You just can't have the money supply start shrinking, so that's absolutely necessary.
I should mention we have two Bobs. There's a McTeer and Heller, so let me jump to Heller as well. Bob Heller, I keep hearing two things. One is that it's unlikely he's going to make news in this news conference. The other is that he's got to establish it as a legitimate tool of communication for years from now. So is there any sense from you that he has to in some way throw the press corps a bone or make it seem worth their while that we're paying so much attention to this?
I think he has given you numerous public statements in front of Congress. The press is no different from Congress. They'll ask tough questions, and he is very well prepared to answer them. I don't think he has to take any special actions. If he gets through this without any big headlines, I think everything is just fine. But the big headline in my mind is that inflation has increased in recent months. That's in the statement there. So the Fed cannot just continue to sit back and do nothing.
Steve?
You know, I'm interested in what Bob is saying and also what Mark Olson said. I understand what he's saying, that inflation has increased in recent months. That is a significant statement, but the statement goes on to say that the underlying inflation is under control or stable, and that inflation expectations are under control. So the policy conclusions, Bob, if I'm not mistaken, are the same. In other words, you add that to the mix, but they don't really do anything with it unless I'm missing something.
Well, but I think if the Fed says inflation has increased,
Steve, Okay,
Mark, why don't you go ahead?
Steve, one of the things that I think is important to remember, and one of the things that I hope comes out, is the impact of increased oil prices, for example, on inflation. They don't make a very tight link, because most people that buy gas recognize that there's a real impact as a result of the increased fuel prices, and yet it doesn't funnel through into underlying inflation. That's something that has not been well explained by the Fed, and I'm hoping the chairman will take the opportunity to address that.
Bob McTeer, I want to jump in here and ask you something related to the comment that Mark Olson made earlier about preparing to adjust holdings as needed to foster maximum employment. My guess is that somebody in the press corps is going to ask him about the unemployment rate and the forecast by the Fed that the unemployment rate won't drop below 5% for another 5 years or so. What can be done, in your view, by adjusting holdings to maximize and foster employment?
Well, what I think the Fed always needs to do is keep the money supply growing at about the capacity rate for the real economy to grow. And at full employment, that's like 3% a year. Right now, with all the unemployment we have, it could be 5%. And that's what we've had. We've only had about a 5% growth in the money supply over the last year. All this talk about the tremendous growth in money is sort of a myth. It just hasn't happened. The Fed has gone to extraordinary circumstances to keep money growing as slowly as it has. Without the extraordinary circumstances, it would have been shrinking. So they've got to keep it growing. However, I do think it's time for them to ease up on those short-term interest rates. They've been at rock bottom for 2 years now, and I don't think they serve any real purpose anymore.
Yeah, Bob Heller, you said you expect the chairman to say we're going to unwind QE2 as soon as possible. I wonder if, given what the statement says, you feel the same way.
Oh, yes, very much. And I fully agree with what Bob McTeer said. The Federal Reserve has been growing the money supply very steadily, 5% on an annual basis since last April. And that is an appropriate monetary policy, I would say. And they should get out of the QE2 as soon as they can.
Well, we're not too far from finding out exactly what the chairman says about that. Bob Heller, Mark Olson, Bob McTeer, thank you very much. Steve, I know we'll be talking to you a little bit later.